Hi folks, welcome back. So in this last video I made just earlier today, in fact, one of the pivotal pieces of data they looked at was the ONET database. And what is the ONET database? It is a compilation of pretty much all the occupations and the abilities and tasks that are involved in those occupations. It's compiled by the US Department of Labor and is updated fairly regularly. And this reminded me that recently, actually, I'd seen a lot of other papers that have based their work in one way or another on this ONET database. And a lot of the work that looks at how AI is going to affect jobs and the economy use this database as a starting point for their analysis. So I wanted to understand a bit more about this database. And rather than do it myself by hand, I thought I'd use Claude Code. And so I wanted to walk through how I did that and what Claude Code told me back. And I thought that would be not just a good example of delegating these kinds of tasks to agents, but also a quick tour of this ONET database. All right, so I'm in Claude Code. I'm using Opus 4.1, and the task I give it is this. I just tell it, I've seen a lot of studies on AI agents that use the ONET database, and I'm giving you two jobs. I put in this ultra think keyword so that it really uses a lot of reasoning effort. So first I want to find some recent studies that use this ONET data, but more importantly, tell me more about the database, download it locally, and then analyze and summarize it. I'm using this with my home directory Claude setup, which I've documented in a couple of other videos. I'll leave links, which is why the first thing it does is go and look at my memories for workflows. Apparently, there's a workflow in there for doing comprehensive web research, so that's great. It must have gotten added in there during the time I've been using this. So it is doing its thing. It found a zip file of the database itself. It downloads that from the website. And later I went and looked at this website. That indeed is the website created by the Department of Labor for this um, data set. And it goes and fetches the latest version 30.0, and it is unzipping the database. Anyway, so it does all these steps, and finally, when the task is complete, it lists a couple of papers that use this ONET database. Now, some of these are familiar, the one by Brynjolfsson and by Felton. These two are very, very widely cited papers. Maybe the others are too, but I haven't seen them. Okay, it downloaded the August 2025 release of the database. It's in a local folder, and it gives me a little bit of a summary of the database. So let me show you the folder itself. All right, so this is the folder. The main thing in here is this. This is the unzipped database, and as you can see, it consists of a lot of fairly large text files, and each of those text files is a database in a TSV, tab separated format. But it also output this summary for me. It tells me what the ONET database is, bunch of recent studies, and the kind of bullet point summaries. But then this is the part I was interested in, the database itself and what it contains. So it contains information about occupations, tasks, and it has data about occupations, and then the tasks in those occupations, the skills, the knowledge areas, abilities, etc. And then some more information about what's in that data set. Now, one of the things it created was this Python script that goes over the entire data set and emits a bunch of summaries. And I wasn't sure if it actually showed me the output from that or what the output from that was. Maybe it used it to produce a summary, but in any case, I asked it about that Python script and to show me the output from it, but how to interpret it. And then it gives me a bit richer detail about the data set. So it has 1,000 occupations, 10 occupational groups, and then a breakdown of tasks and skills and abilities and so on. So all that is great. So digging a bit deeper, the next thing I asked it was to explain to me the terminology. So the data set talks about groups and tasks and skills and all these things. And I wasn't sure about how these all related to each other and what the definitions were. So that was my next question to Claude Code. And this is what it explained to me. So you have these broad groups called occupation groups. And of course, within that, you have occupations. But within occupations, you have tasks, which are specific work activities that describe what workers actually do in their jobs. And within those work activities, you have further levels of detail like generalized work activities, intermediate or detailed work activities. And then you also have characteristics of the workers, like what abilities influence performance on the job. So abilities are enduring attributes, what you can do naturally. So things like cognitive abilities or psychomotor abilities and so on. And another key dimension in this data is, in addition to abilities, you have skills, which are different from abilities and tasks. These are developed capacities that facilitate learning or the more rapid acquisition of knowledge. So there's a crucial distinction between abilities. These are kind of innate enduring attributes as opposed to skills, which are learned capacities. Okay, so that's good. It told me all these definitions, and then I wanted to ask about specific attributes and jobs and occupations. So just to start off, I was curious which occupations most require physical abilities like strength and stamina, because that was one of the kinds of abilities: physical strength, static strength, stamina. So I was curious about which jobs need that the most. So here's the question. Given the information in ONET, which occupations most require physical abilities? And it goes off and tells me, all right, the most physically demanding occupations are dancers, farm workers, iron and steel workers, athletes, firefighters. Okay, so that makes sense. And the least physically demanding sectors are legal, computer, mathematical, business, and financial. That also makes sense. And then it throws in some more color. Dancers have the highest physical demands, even more than construction workers. Interesting. And I didn't really ask for this, implications for AI and automation, but it went ahead and told me anyway, which is fine, I guess. All right, so I wanted to look at a few data points for things I do know something about. I asked it for the occupation of software engineer, what are the tasks, work activities, and worker characteristics? And then I wanted to double check the agent's work. So I told it I want to verify your work, point to the specific line numbers in the raw ONET database that you're using for source data and your reasoning to arrive at the final answer. Okay, so it goes and does a bunch of grepping and computation and whatnot, and it comes back with what are the things required for software developers. All right, so there's a bunch of tasks that software developers need to do, and they are mostly around analyzing requirements, designing systems, testing, modifying code. Of course, yeah, that all makes sense. But the important part is that it tells me the line numbers to look for in the specific file in this data set. So task statements.txt line 2474. So let's go check if it got that right. All right, so this is line 2474, and the code for software developers is this number 15-1252.00, which you can see over here. So that's the code for software developers. And here you can see all the lines: analyze user needs and software requirements, develop or direct software system testing, confer with system analysts. So yeah, as you look through these line numbers, and it pointed me to the correct lines, I can double check and verify that the agent did indeed look at the right data. And the same thing for abilities: oral, written comprehension and expression, problem sensitivity, deductive reasoning, and then skills are critical thinking, reading comprehension, active learning. And I went and checked these line numbers. It did actually get it right. Now, the next thing I wanted to know was the definitions of these terms. So in abilities and skills, there are these things like there's a skill for critical thinking and there's an ability for selective attention. And I wanted to know what the definitions of these abilities and skills are. So that was my next question. And again, it chugs and goes through the database and comes back and tells me all definitions are in a single file content model reference. And I need to look at 192, line 192 and line 31. So that's content model reference. And here's a line for critical thinking: using logic and reasoning to identify the strengths and weaknesses of alternative solutions. All right, very cool. And the other one was line 31, which talks about selective attention, the ability to concentrate on a task over a period of time without being distracted. Nice. Okay. So it pointed me to the definitions for these things along with the exact place where these definitions occur in the data set. So that's great. It's doing great so far. Oh, and by the way, it helpfully points out the key distinction between abilities and skills. And then you can go spelunking in the data a bit more. For example, I asked, what are the occupations for which selective attention is most important? And there you go. The answer is top finding: air traffic controllers, 4.5 on a 5-point scale. Airline pilots, commercial pilots, locomotive engineers. Medical monitoring roles like anesthesiologists, gambling surveillance officers. And here's something interesting: only one occupation scores above 4.0: air traffic controllers. All right, so that makes a lot of sense. Pushing along a bit more, what are the occupations for which critical thinking is most important? Again, it goes and does its thing. Note that it's writing code for computing the answers to each of these questions. Occupations requiring critical thinking. Top finding: judges scored the highest, 4.88 on a 5-point scale. So the legal and medical professions come out on top. Executive and strategic roles are a close second, followed by research and analysis. Okay, so all that makes sense. So I thought that was a cool example of how Claude actually went and really saved me a lot of time. Because without AI, the way I would have done this is Google searched for ONET, found the website, clicked around on the website to find the zip file that contains the data set and downloaded it, and then manually unzipped it and then looked at all the files in that data set one by one to try and understand what the entities are, how the files relate to each other, how they key into each other, and so on. But this just really made it very smooth. And when asked for a verification trace, Claude was really good about pointing to the exact line numbers in the source data that backed up the assertions that it was making. So at the end of this kind of exploratory data analysis session with Claude, I have a decent idea of how the ONET database is structured, what's in it, what are the entities, what the definitions are, and how to navigate it. So I thought that was a cool example of agents actually saving time on a fairly high level, fairly complex task. So hopefully that was a helpful walkthrough and also helpful in understanding what the ONET database is and what it contains. Because, yeah, pretty much every paper that looks at AI and its impact on jobs starts with the ONET database. All right, hope you enjoyed that. If you like content like this, consider subscribing, like the video, and I will see you next time.